So yeah, we're gonna talk about add-ons. Let's get into add-ons. We only have 30 minutes and there's a lot to cover. There's not really that much, but I'm gonna stretch. I'm gonna vamp it out. Add-ons are coming. They're coming up in add-on changes are coming in pre-patch. So January 20th if you're in NA, or January 21st in EU, and then the 22nd, 23rd if you're in Korea or China. So what does this mean? It means everything that you are using now may or may not exist. The good news is almost everything you're using now will exist. So I'm just going to give you an example here. We're going to have a look at this is my UI on retail right now. So if you're looking at this screen, you're thinking, wow, there's a lot going on there. There is only 2 items on this screenshot that will not be available in midnight. And it's the pink bars that are just on the left side of the screen above my raid frames, and then the small icons that are surrounding the raid frames that tell me what external defensives I have available. So those are the only 2 things from this screenshot that won't be available. And to prove it to you, here's a screenshot from my beta UI where you can see it is almost identical to my retail UI. So if you are really in love with the way that your UI looks right now today, the good news is you are almost certainly going to be able to replicate that at an almost 1-to-1. So there's nothing to be worried about. So that's the good news. For those of you who were really excited that your UIs wouldn't look like that, it's also still good news because you just have to not install the new add-ons and you'll be able to still look like that. So we're going to talk about that, some of the changes that are coming up and what we have available in add-ons in midnight. So what is the add-on changes? Some people have called it the add-on apocalypse, add-on-ageddon, I've heard. I've seen, some posts on social media, people saying things along the lines of, oh, they're removing all add-ons. None of that is true. So what we are losing in pre-patch and then carrying on into midnight is computational weak auras. So what do I mean by computational weak auras? If you think of the Fractalus fight, some of you may be aware of a weak aura pack on Fractalus that will tell you exactly what you'll put down 6 raid markers to mark the lanes. And when you get the debuff on you, you'll get an icon that says go stand on X. And then you just go and stand on X. That's a computational weak aura. It solves the fight for you. Those no longer exist. We will not have anything like that in midnight. But don't worry, we will still have things like reminders and different ways to skin and show buffs or debuffs on enemies. That will still exist, but we're not going to have the things that solve a problem for you. So your Fractalus weak aura would do that. If anybody remembers back to Aberys, the Neltharion fight, he had a mechanic, I think it was called Hearts, and that people would have to spread with circles. That had a computational weak aura that was solving it. That won't exist anymore. I think across the board, everybody agrees that that is a good thing. We don't want devs designing fights with the expectation that computational weak auras exist. And we don't want raid teams feeling forced to install these and use these to make their prog easier. So those being removed, net positive. The other thing we're losing is party-wide cooldown tracking. So I mentioned around my raid frames how you could see I was tracking all of the external defensives that healers had available. I tank, so it's nice for me to be able to say, Brock, can I have Ironbark? And then I get Ironbark, or June, Cocoon on Drex, and then I get Cocoon. We are losing that ability. This one, less ideal, losing this information. It means you're going to have more guesswork as a tank when calling for externals, or as a DPS. If you're a DPS who calls for externals, 10 out of 10, you get a bunch of bonus points because you are the real heroes of the raid team. So we're losing that party-wide cooldown tracking. It also means we're losing the ability to track our DPS offensive cooldowns, which will make things like power infusions slightly more difficult to track. And if you're an augmentation evoker, it can make your presence application a little bit more difficult to decide where to send it. But the good news for augmentation is that Ebon Might is now party-wide, so you don't have to worry about optimizing that. So Blizzard has been designing to change to a world where this is the expectation. And we expect they're going to continue to do that moving forward. What we're keeping visual reskinning. So I mentioned the way my UI looks on retail, it's going to look almost the exact same way in pre-patch and midnight if I want. Most of that is staying, and almost all out of combat add-ons are staying. So your bag add-ons, your map add-ons, your action bar add-ons, all of that stuff will still be largely untouched and functional in midnight. So if all the things, those kinds of add-ons, handy notes, there should be no degradation to that. All of those add-ons will stay. I imagine your rare scanner will stay, your Silver Dragon. I haven't personally tested those, but those are massive. So I imagine that those will stick around. Those two specific. The other ones are definitely sticking around that I mentioned, but those two specifically, I imagine will stick around. So most out of combat add-ons are going to be fine as long as the devs update them for midnight. So for those of you who aren't super concerned about in combat situations or necessarily how your UI looks, but you really want to know how many attempts you've taken to get a specific mount from the Azure span, you should still be able to track all of that stuff. What should you do? So pre-patch, as I mentioned, is landing on June 20th. Nope. January 20th if you're in NA, January 21st if you're in EU. I would recommend on the 19th or the 20th, or even today right after this, to log into the game, turn on your UI, and take a screenshot and save it somewhere so that you have a reference for what it looks like now if you want to try to recreate that in midnight. Now, some of you may not want to do that. Some of you might be at a point where you're like, I am just tired of all of this noise, and I would really like to not be like that in midnight. And this is the perfect situation for you. Midnight pre-patch is happening. You can not take a screenshot of your UI. I would still take one, but you don't have to. And you could just go natty. You can run just the base Blizzard UI for the entirety of pre-patch. You'll have 5 weeks to use edit mode, fine-tune things, move stuff around, and figure out what do I not have access to now that I miss? What do I not have? What looks in a way now that I don't like that I would like to look another way? And pre-patch is such a low-stakes environment because AOTC is gone, CE is gone, your titles for Mythic Plus and PvP are gone. You can really honestly take this 5 weeks to just relax, to quote the Pandarans, slow down and just run your UI, the base UI, use the edit mode to put things where you want it, and do that for 5 weeks. And honest to goodness, that is my number one recommendation to everybody, anybody who will listen. I was at the grocery store yesterday buying a sourdough loaf. I told the cashier, hey, listen, on the 20th, just run a base UI. And they said, what? And then I paid for my bread and went on my way. But that's my recommendation. Do that. Be ready, be prepared, and then what you're missing, you can figure out and put it in later. If you're somebody who's been on the beta or on the PTR testing and you already know, I really don't like the portraits on my player frames, I need a player frame add-on, we have solutions for that. You can get those in right away. And then lastly, most importantly, this is for everyone, don't panic. This is a 20-year-old game made by a company that is exceptionally good at making games with a massive community of people who are ravenous about it. Add-on devs will do whatever they have to do to support the game in its current state and its future states, and Blizzard will make sure that the game is functional and things work. And if there are problems, they will react quickly. We have seen them do it in the past, so don't panic. Everything's going to be fine. And at the bare minimum, we have 5 weeks where all you have to do is simply exist. So that's what's happening, what's coming up in pre-patch. Now, I'm going to switch gears here. We're going to talk specifically about what are some of the add-ons if you want to make changes to your UI. So we have specific add-ons. I would recommend if you're not sure, so you've done my testing, you've gone and said, hey, I'm going to do what Sean said. He seems like a smart guy. He's got those glasses on. They make him look very intelligent, even though they're slightly too small for his face. But it's not his fault. He has a giant head. What can he do? It's hard to find glasses that fit. But you've taken my advice and you've said, okay, I'm going to take these 5 weeks to figure it out. And as you're going through, you're seeing things you want to do to replace stuff. So I'm going to talk about some add-ons for your UI that you can use piecemeal to put together like a jigsaw puzzle type effect to set up your UI. First off, unit frames. So what are unit frames? Unit frames are your player frame, your target frame, your target of target, your focus target, and then your party frames and your raid frames. I'm moving my finger where they would be on my screen, which means nothing to you, but it helps me to think. If you are looking to just replace unit frames and you're happy with everything else, my top recommendations to you would be unhalted unit frames or better Blizz frames. This is just for your player frame and your target frame. If that's all you want to change, unhalted unit frames, which will be available in pre-patch, or better Blizz frames. Those are two lightweight, very easy to use add-ons. They're going to give you all kinds of customizability to make your player and target frames look the way you want. If you're wanting to just change your party or raid frames, I recommend for everybody who's not a genius, Dander's frames. Dander's frames is a new add-on. It's only been around since the beta launched, but it's very easy to use, has a very understandable menu, and it makes a lot of sense when you're changing things, how to position stuff. I had a really easy time setting up Dander's frames to look the way that I wanted. If you're a big brain or somebody who's already familiar with Grid 2, Grid 2 will be supported in pre-patch and midnight. I attempted to use this on the beta, and my job before doing this was literally a rocket surgeon. I maintained and repaired missiles and targeting systems, and I struggled to figure out the Grid 2 menu. So maybe I'm really dumb. It's possible. I know a lot of healers were using this. Grid 2 was a healer baby for a long time. It has a lot of functionality, and again, it is another add-on that's been around for a long time. And that's something of a trend in the recommendations I'm going to make. I get warm feelings if I know an add-on or the add-on dev has been around for a long time because I trust it'll be supported for a long time. So better Blizz frames has been around forever. Unhalted unit frames has been around since last patch. Very good devs on both of those. Grid 2 been around forever. Dander's frames is a new one, like I said, but it is in a really good spot right now, and I suspect it's going to continue to get that kind of update. So those are really good ways to replace your unit frames, and those would be the ones that I would recommend, and they're going to give you the most flexibility. Next, for your cooldown manager, this is going to be what's replacing your class HUD weak aura in the center of your screen. For those of you who are familiar with Luxdos weak aura packs, this is the replacement for that, the Blizzard cooldown manager. I would recommend TweaksUI cooldowns. So TweaksUI is an all-in-one we're going to talk about later, but there's a specific breakdown package for just the cooldown manager that has a really, really lovely functionality that lets you put per icon things in separate docs. I'm going to do a whole video on that one, but you can basically recreate entire weak aura packs through TweaksUI. It's very nice. And then next to that is the better cooldown manager. It's the same dev as unhalted unit frames. It's Unhalted is the guy's name. So either of those for your cooldown manager, if you want to replace the main Blizzard one. The biggest advantage these two give over the base Blizzard cooldown manager is the ability to center the icons. It might not bother anybody else, but I have a bad brain. So on the Blizzard cooldown manager, there's no way to justify the icons to the center. They can be right justified or left justified, which is fine if you have an even number of icons in 2 rows. But if you have an uneven number of icons in 2 rows, you just have this weird gap at one end, and it completely shuts me, like everything stops working. I have to remember to breathe. So luckily, TweaksUI and Better Cooldown Manager both offer a center function. There was an article recently posted on Wowhead that suggested Arc Cooldown Manager or Arc UI, which is a cooldown manager, which isn't recommended here because it also doesn't have a center option for justification. So that's why it's not on this list. If you're wondering why that's not here, but these two are. Next, nameplates. If you want to, so the Blizzard nameplates out of the box coming in pre-patch and midnight are really, really good. And I would recommend them to like 90% of the player base. Use these. There's lots of good ways to customize them, the way they look, the information they give you. They're going to be the right answer for 90% of the player base. But if you're somebody who does a lot of Mythic Plus and pushes at a decent level, Platinator and Plater give you one option that slightly puts them above Blizzard nameplates. And this is the first point when I have some frustration. Blizzard is going through these add-on changes, and they have been on the record of saying we don't want add-ons to be able to do things that you can't do in the base game. And when I heard that, I thought, hey, that's great. I agree with that as well. You should be able to do everything in the base game that you can do with an add-on and just use the add-ons for visual representation. And then we found out that you could color mob nameplates in Plater and Platinator based on mob type. So boss, lieutenant, and caster, which is a functionality you do not have with the base nameplates. So this frustrates me a little bit because it starts to poke holes in Blizzard's reasoning for why we're having to go through this change and why we need to have a meeting to talk about add-ons. But that functionality, if you're somebody who really likes that functionality, you're a tank and it helps you to know what mobs to pull. You're a DPS and you want to know prio. You are somebody who wants to know what I have to kick. Platinator and Plater both offer that ability to color based on mob type. That is I won't say it's a huge advantage in Mythic Plus, but it is definitely a competitive advantage in Mythic Plus, and I would recommend using one of them for that reason. If you're capping out at 12s or 10s and you're happy there, you don't need to worry about that. But the higher you go, the more every advantage you can give yourself, the better. Of these two add-ons, I've been a long-time Plater user, and I will potentially use it in Midnight, but going into the pre-patch, I am hard swapped to Platinator. It's got an import-export function, so you can just grab somebody's nameplates if you really like the look of them, but its designer, its builder for making nameplates is literally drag and drop. If Plater is building a website with HTML, Platinator is Squarespace. It's just so lovely, so easy to use, so user-friendly, and the developer for it, Mouse, who is a longtime developer, has a whole suite of add-ons that I'll be using, including Baginator and Chattinator. So if you're familiar with those, same dev, long-standing like history of good quality add-ons. So I'll be using that for sure in the pre-patch. And then once Midnight comes out, it'll remain to be seen if I swap to Plater or Platinator. But again, 90% of the player base, the new Blizzard nameplates are really, really good. They show you the target of the cast. They show you as much information as you need, but these are they just give you a little bit extra edge. And then lastly, for single specific add-ons is for your player resource bar. This is your Holy Power, your Maelstrom, your Fury, Sensei's class resource bar. Now I wrote it out in 3 words, but in CurseForge, it's 1 word. But if I made this 1 word, it just looked like a jumble of letters and nobody would be able to read it. It is edited right in the edit mode, very, very low impact, and helps you to display all of your resources in a really gorgeous way, right anywhere you want on the screen, and definitely recommend. So if you're looking to piecemeal together an add-on, you could use any combination of these add-ons to make a UI that looks functionally the way that your UI does now on retail. And you can drag and drop, use the ones you want, don't use the ones you want. And it's a really good way to put it together, and a great way of, especially if you're starting with the, week 1, I'm going to go nothing. I'm going bare UI week 1 and then go from there. This is a great way to start filling in those gaps. Now, if you're somebody who wants to do a full package, so you're an LVUI user and you're like, you know what, I already know I don't like the way Blizzard UI looks. I like square boxes. I like to have that control over font and positioning. I'm just going to grab an all-in-one. Those are available as well, and there's a few that I could recommend that are really good and that are available in pre-patch and then coming up in Midnight. So for all of the LVUI users in the house, LVUI will be available in Midnight. It's unlikely to be available for pre-patch in a robust form. So I would hold off a little bit until you jump into that if you're waiting for it. But it is going to be available in Midnight. It won't have all of the same functionality it has now, but it will have a lot of functionality back. And I didn't mention it. I should have mentioned it. Cell as well for healers. In the previous slide, we were looking at raid frames. Cell is coming back as well for Midnight, but Cell is not going to be available for pre-patch as far as I know. So you might not have access to it there. So what are these all in one? So we have Tweaks UI. This is a new add-on, but the dev is very active, spends a lot of time working on it, and is very open to feedback. I have specifically sent Davin a list of hey, here's things I would like to have. And within a day, it's been turned around and my requests have all been added. His Discord is really a great way to get a hold of him. So very, very good dev, good add-on, and a great all-in-one. And the good thing about all 3 of these is that they're all modular. So if you want TweaksUI for his unit frames, his player and target frames, and you want it for his cooldown manager and his resource skinning, you can take that and then you can just turn off his action bars and you can turn off his nameplates. And TweaksUI is written in such a way that if you are running Plater, those of you who use LVUI might be familiar with this message. If you're running Plater or Platinator, when you log in, if you have TweaksUI installed, it'll say detected Platinator, we're turning off the nameplate module. And he's including Danders in that as well. Detected Danders frames, I'm turning off the raid frame party frame. So TweaksUI is a great all-in-one availability. NephUI is another one that's very popular right now among streamers. So you'll see a lot of people using this. A lot of the same functionality as TweaksUI. Most of these all-in-ones are interchangeable. And then QuaziiUI has been available on his Patreon through the beta, but I believe the intention is to make that free for everybody once pre-patch hits. So that is another option as well. There are other all-in-ones. I didn't want to mention them. I didn't want to get into all of them because a lot of them do the same thing. I am really fond of the TweaksUI because it comes with the docking. So your buff frames, your buffs are dynamic. They grow and shrink as opposed to being in one place. If you've used the cooldown manager, you'll know what I mean. And just because of how it's having direct access to a dev and being able to ask for things, that will obviously make me more inclined to recommend it because he does the things that I want immediately, and that feels really nice. So it's good to have that. And it's not just me. That's not like a me thing. His Discord, he has recommended features, and he's like very active in there, constantly pushing stuff. So those are your all-in-ones. These are going to be things that reskin your whole UI. So if you remember my screenshot back to the beginning, that was done with NephUI. So NephUI is what I used to recreate that and Platinator. So these are available as well. And like I said, LVUI will be coming in midnight. For those of you who get the warm fuzzies from LVUI and are ready for it, you'll be able to have access to it in midnight. And then let's move on to raid utility. So this is a big one. And a lot of people, I think, are worried about raid utility. This was the biggest concern. So we're going to talk a little bit about what's coming and what's staying. Encounter bar skinners. So if you're somebody who doesn't like the visual representation of Blizzard's encounter bar, don't worry. Bigwigs and DBM are both going to exist. Both do exist now, and they will reskin the encounter bar into the bars that we know and love. They have all of the functionality to make those look the way we want them to look. They are losing some functionality, unfortunately. They're not going to be able to change the name of spells. They're not going to be able to let us, I don't think they're going to be able to let us highlight specific spells. I'm not 100% sure on that, though. So if either of those authors are here, they can confirm that. But it is, I mean, for me, it's a must-have. I love the bars. So Bigwigs and DBM, largely unchanged. The only restriction for them is that they are forced to just use the encounter bar data that Blizzard gives them. So that is the only downside to the new world we're living in. But I think for the majority of people, they're not going to notice a difference. No, that's okay. We can check after. It's like such a specific thing. I know we're going to be able to block out by role through the Blizzard UI and therefore by DBM and Bigwigs as well. I just didn't know if we would be able to specifically highlight individual spells. So, yeah. And then next, I want to talk about notes and tool packages. So a lot of people are familiar with method raid tools. Just one second. Method raid tools is a lot of us use it for notes. So we get our healer note in there. If you're super keen, you're putting your own note in there to tell you when to use personals or to tell you when to send a defensive or to tell you when to use cooldowns. And it also has other functionality like ready checking and timers, all that kind of stuff. Method raid tools will largely exist in the manner that it does now. So no massive changes there. Northern Sky raid tools is a sort of new add-on. It came around in Manaforge Omega, but it's getting new functionality now. Northern Sky Raid Tools is going to be the one that if you're a Mythic Raider, your raid team will probably want you using this. And the reason is it's going to have note functionality built in, but all of the word commands you see on screen, stack on X, lock gate now, that kind of stuff, you'll be able to implement all of those directions using the WoW Utils website, which is Visario's website, and putting it into Northern Sky Raid Tools. You just lose the ability to Like I wouldn't be able to say, Dax, you go stack on X because he got an ability. It would say stack on X for everybody. So whoever got the ability would have to know they have to go there. So it's going to have that sort of directional functionality. And it's also going to have the ability to, on nameplates of enemies. So for example, Fallen King Saladar, there's a fight where the enemies have 5 stacks of a debuff and you have to kick them in order. And each one you interrupt removes a stack from the others. So you start by interrupting the one with 0 stacks and work your way down to the 5th one. It's really hard to see which one you're supposed to kick next from a buff perspective. You can just look and see who has an active cast bar, but then you're reacting much faster. So you'll be able to use this to see a number that says this one is the next one, this one is the next one, this one is the next one. So it's not a computational thing. It's just displaying the information that is available in game in a different way. But Northern Sky Raid Tools is going to be very, very advantageous, even if you're a heroic raider, because it allows you to input your own notes. I really, really like when I'm getting ready for a raid fight, putting in a note that says, I want to use Ardent Defender at this time. I want to use Guardian of Ancient Kings at this time, and having that come up on my screen and reminding me, hey, use this now. So it's very similar to how we do MRT notes now with the K's weak aura. It actually just replaces that entirely. The only caveat is it's not able to pull triggers off of spells or off of phases. So it's a timer based on we know these spells are happening when. But the good news is, maybe not good news if you don't like tools like this, but the good news is it can pick a trigger of when does Blizzard push more spells into a queue, which is what happens at phases. So it can like sort of backwards track phasing. It's going to offer a lot. If you're hearing me say all this stuff and you're thinking, oh my God, it's the same thing that we have right now that we just fought to get rid of. Why are they doing this? It's not. It can do no computations. It's literally just notation and like displaying information differently. It will not be, it should not be required. And it's not something that's going to give a competitive advantage to players. It's just going to make it so that people who benefit from having those notes can still have them. So don't worry. It's not, we're not returning to the old ways. It's just, it is a tool that is available though, that a lot of teams, I suspect, Mythic Raid teams specifically, will be using it and could give you help if you're a heroic raider who likes having notes and reminders that says, okay, make sure I use this defensive here, especially because I'm tanking and I'm raid leading. It's really nice for me to have a thing that pings me and says, hey, don't forget, you don't want to die to this punch in the face. And then lastly, loot options, everybody's favorite, RC Loot Council. Good news, everybody. It still works. RC Loot Council is back, still functions. They specifically made exceptions to allow it to work. So we'll have RC Loot Council available to us in the next raid tier. That's it. There's a lot going on there, and it seems like a lot of information, and it's a lot to digest. So luckily, I have a very good friend of mine who is also the my GM and my raid leader from Euphoric in North America, Broccoliz, and she is partners with Volk, the writer, the author of Questionably Epic. Brock put together a beautiful graphic that tells you everything that's available, when it's coming, and what it does. And so we've got LVUI, all-in-ones, LVUI, NephUI tweaks, cooldown manager and HUDs, raid unit frames, nameplates, general skinning, bartender dominoes, all coming back. Raid utility and admin. We have this available here. So I'm going to give this link. Yeah, I'll give the link. This is actually right on QE Live. So I will drop the link in the chat for that right now. Brock's amazing. If you do see this and you like it, she's on Twitter. Feel free to send a tweet and thank her for it. But Brock's amazing. And yeah, so the big takeaway, folks, add-ons are changing. The way we play the game is not really changing though. So we're going to be in a good spot. If you're really comfortable with the way things are now, life is looking largely unchanged for you in pre-patch and midnight. If you don't like the way things are now and you're looking for a reset, this is your opportunity to get it. And if you're just here because Halionics offered you free ice cream and you're here for the ice cream, I hope you get the flavor you want. Artemis is here. Perfect. We're all out of ice cream. All right, so no ice cream. So that is the whole presentation. Artemis, if you're here, is DBM going to be able to highlight specific spells and give an alert, an audio alert for specific spells, or is it only by type as my question.